I'm going to be doing the buyer consultation today. This is generally a training or a topic that is reserved for productivity coaching. Usually with contract training, we're just like getting into the nuts and bolts of like the contract itself. Um, you know, breaking out the pieces of, our contingencies, etc. I saw the last time we went over the buyer consultation was back in 2022. So it has been a minute. Um, really again, just kind of wanting to give it tips from, maybe other perspectives. Um, I'm an agent as well, so I brought up, I'm gonna show you guys a very, very old buyer guide that I have, but really it's just like, the shell of it and the reasoning behind it is consistent, right? So um, I don't know how long the training will be today. I don't expect it would take the entire hour. So if you guys want to open it up for other questions on any topic afterward, we definitely can. And the last thing I'll say before we get into it, usually I'm having a buyer, like a dedicated buyer's agent from a team doing this. So like I said, last time I did this, I think I had Will Stale from the Stale Realty Group help me with it, kind of go over what his process is. So maybe next time we'll get another buyer's agent in here. But again, the pieces of it are all the same. The why behind it is all the same. So stop me at any time with questions or comments, always. We'll get into it. So what is a buyer consultation? So the who, what, where, and why. So my, and everyone's kind of main drive with doing a proper buyer consultation is really just to get ahead of questions that a buyer is going to have, addressing questions, obviously going over the process. I'm really going to be talking and aiming this more at like a first-time home buyer, um, and really just educating our buyers on the process. But really like another way that you can think about why you would want to do a buyer consultation too is just to like head off any liability on your end, that you can say that you dotted your I's and crossed your T's should there be any hiccups later on. Should a buyer say, like, you've never told me this, you can have it documented on when you went over it. You can have it documented that you passed along this information to them. Obviously, there's a lot of information being thrown at somebody in these consultations. And no one ever expects a client to remember this, but it's also something that, like, as questions are coming up, you can say, yep, we addressed this, and you can also say, I'll be going over this more in detail as the process moves along. So really you're just trying to establish yourself as the professional in the room, right? Just like an attorney would have a consultation with a potential client hearing their case, we're here to establish ourselves as the professional, the experts here. So doing that in a formal way is just going to set you right up. So um, how long should a buyer consultation take? So really all of this should take, I would say when I'm booking them, no more than 30 to 45 minutes. You should really be able to practice this and get it down to kind of a science in terms of like, okay, we're going to cover this. It should take this long, making sure that your bullet points are clear and concise, and really like making it digestible for a client. Where is it best to give a buyer consultation? So, there's definitely different schools of thought on this. A lot of times, in our industry, right, we're like in the field, we're in a million places. A lot of times, agents will just meet their clients out at coffee shops. Um, I think it's best to either do it at the office. Again, you're establishing yourself as the professional, doing it in a professional setting. And again, there's no right way or wrong way. Again, it might just be your style to do it someplace like a coffee shop, make it feel a little bit more casual. Um, but I now actually have found that my best, where I feel more comfortable is setting up a Zoom call, actually. So I'll do that in an office setting still. But I have found just in terms of being able to get the information off, the ability to screen share, I have found has been amazing because I can just pull up my guide, I can pull up my contract, and people can read it right there as I'm explaining it to them. Um, it's also just in terms of coordinating time wise, we can totally eliminate drive times somewhere. So again, I've just had a lot of success with just setting something up over Zoom. So I really would promote that idea to you guys. Again, before just being in an office, like you've got your pamphlets, you've got your contracts up, and you're kind of like, trying to, and this is just logistically speaking, I'm really getting into the weeds here, but just like it was always kind of awkward, to like try and explain something reading it upside down. So again, I just have found a lot of success with just doing it over a Zoom. So when is it best to give a buyer consultation? So, in practice, like if you are referred to somebody, if someone was referred to you, excuse me, I'm always saying, like, first thing, I would love to get us together for 30 minutes before we meet out, and kind of go over the process, especially with a first-time home buyer, and really explaining like the lender process to them and just establishing the need for getting in front of a lender right away as well. So I'm doing it right away. If I am meeting them out at a house first, then they're at the open house or at the showing. I will say that, my process always is to meet first, generally, and then establish the search from there. So I'm definitely bringing it up right at a showing as well if I haven't already met with them. So right away is the takeaway here. And who is it best to give a buyer consultation to? So, obviously for first-time home buyers, again, the education piece, really like holding their hand throughout the process. But I think it's completely appropriate to hop on a Zoom, hop on a call with somebody who is also just, maybe they're moving into their next home. Um, Also just like for planning purposes, like this is what we should expect. If we're going to find something first, you need to sell your home first. You need to get the equity out of your house first before we try and find something. So again, that conversation could be quicker than a typical formal buyer consultation. But again, all of this is kind of obvious. You're just trying to like plan with your client, and consult with their needs. So, um, what should your consultation include? So you're going to introduce yourself and Keller Williams. I am always, and I'll show you guys some examples here. But giving a bio of yourself. I'm really, really speaking to the power of Keller Williams in my consultations and in my introductions. We've got a team, like a network of 600 plus agents. And, part of the reason why I'm great to work with is because of the network that I have. So, in terms of like specifically with a buyer situation, I can send out, if we're not finding what we're looking for, I've got a network of agents. I've got a list, an MLS list of properties that could be in excluded. We could find your home there. Um, Things that are coming soon, things that may not have hit the market yet. Our Facebook groups, I talk about our Facebook groups, just again, just that conversations are happening all of the time. So, if we're not finding your home in MLS, we have potentially homes out there that are just not listed yet that I can tap into our network with. And when I say your team, I use this loosely. I mean, you may be on a formal team, and of course, you're going to speak to the power of your team leaders, and your contract coordinators, your listing managers, etc. But if you're just a solo agent, I am talking about my team leader, Nikki. I'm talking about the compliance team. That is definitely, we're in your corner for asking questions, obviously, about the contracts. I've got solo agents who, just when they don't know anything, they're calling me to spitball things, so like leverage just your compliance team. Um, and of course, like if you hire contract coordinators, I'm not on a team, right? So I use a individual contract coordinator, contract to close coordinator. So I'm speaking about her. So just again, I really just want you guys to hear with like as being a solo agent, it's not just you. You have the power of a lot of people behind you. Your lenders, they're part of your team. Your inspectors, they're a part of your team. So again, with the consultation, the general process from start to finish. So I am really going over, maybe I'll just pull up the buyer guide.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. Um, so this is an example. This is just, I'm kind of embarrassed to even share this one, but this is like an old buyer guide of mine. Um, I was just speaking to the fact that, you're introducing yourself. So I've just got bullet points about myself. And then I get into a section on testimonials. I'm not reading these to a client, but just to show that they're there, I'm sharing this with the client. Um, and then getting into the home buying process, which was the next bullet point on our training. So really, the most of my buyer consultation is really structured around this page, and I'm going through just like generally the steps um, of the process. I've got a pop up here that I need to get rid of. Um, Going over the steps. So obtaining a financial pre-approval. So I'm really heavy on this point. I say arguably this step might be more important than even connecting with an agent. They go hand in hand. We need to have that pre-approval process prior to going out and complete prior to going out and showing homes to make sure that we have an understanding of your buying power, how much you want to look up to. With first-time home buyers, I am definitely always communicating that um, you've got two numbers that you might want to focus on, what you can and what you are pre-approved up to based off of your down payment, assets, income, etc. But then might be a second number of what you want to spend per month because they could be drastically different numbers. So make sure that you are asking those questions of your lender. This is how much I want to stay per month. Being house poor, no one wants to be house poor, right? So it could be, again, depending on how much they actually want to spend per month, could be much lower than what they're actually pre-approved up to. Analyzing your needs in a buyer consultation. So this is where we're at now, Mr. Buyer. This is where you're going to tell me your goals, where you want to be. Um, Getting the nuts and bolts of, again, price, location, room counts, bedroom counts, bathroom counts, etc. I will say too, just like a tip now in today's, um, just with today's market and the low inventory, I'm asking the questions from our buyers like, okay, what does your ideal house look like to you? And I will let you know that when I set up a search, I'm really just going to narrow it down to price and location because I don't want you to miss anything. I'd rather have you rule out a house that you don't want versus, you missing something potentially, because the information that you are being or that you receive is being relied on people entering in that information. If somebody enters something in wrong, you don't want to miss the opportunity to see it. And again, with the low inventory, it's not like they're going to be bombarded with listings really. So I have been doing that for the past 5 years, I would say. I just don't even put in bedroom or bathroom count at this point anymore. Back in 2013, 2012, when the market was flooded, then I would really be narrowing it down. But not at this point. So just it's kind of to make it easier on you too. So, um, buyer agency, I'm always visiting buyer agency last, actually. So I'll let a buyer know, we'll talk about this in a minute. But then the process too will be selecting the properties, and then this is where I get into communication. So, once I set you up on this search, and then I will show them MLS, and I'll bring it right up here. I'll show them what a search looks like. I'll show them what they can expect the data to look like when they receive it. I also, at this point, will say too, you know, you're going to be receiving these listings through MLS, which is my database, our database, which is the same database that like Zillow draws from, that Realtor.com draws from. And if you are used to looking at Realtor.com and Zillow.com, that's great. But this will be the most accurate information that you will receive. So again, selecting properties, if there is something that you like, then I think the best method of communication, and you're going to choose what your best method is. So mine is text. I think that is the best way. Like when we hang up today, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to put us all on a group text thread. And if something pops up, you can just text me and and you can either send me the address or the MLS number, and then we'll coordinate from there about getting into the property. Again, kind of drawing on your team, quote unquote. This is also where I'm going to right size expectations in terms of getting into a home. So with this market and the speed of this market right now, and I know it has slowed down a little bit, but generally my goal is to get you into a home within 24 hours. If I can't make it, I will call on another person, another agent to show it for you. And this is again kind of the nice thing about addressing these things in a buyer consultation right away, so that they're not surprised when you need to call another agent to show a property. You're setting up that expectation right away. Like, this is how this process is going to go. I only bring that up specifically because I just always felt weird in the beginning of like calling other agents to cover showings for me. But also just making sure that you're highlighting it and like putting it in the vein of, my goal is to get you into this property fast. So I don't want to let my schedule hold that up. And it might not be often that I have to call somebody, but again, they've already been made aware that that might be the case. So then viewing properties, again, we'll be viewing properties. And then when you finally select a property that you want to write an offer on, that's when we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the offer process. And I think usually what I'm doing when I'm talking about the market in terms of like, I'm revisiting the fact that it might be more than one time that we're writing an offer on a property. So when I'm talking about buyer agency, I'm usually bringing that up. So writing an offer to purchase. So, again, okay, so we're here, we're at this buyer consultation. When we write an offer, that'll be the next time that we're going to spend a lengthy amount of time with one another, over Zoom or in the office, and I'm going to go over an offer to purchase with you that at length that first time. If we end up writing more than one offer, that will be cut out. We'll be just be discussing terms from that point on, but I just want to make sure that I'm going over an offer with you at least one time in detail. And again, that's why I love Zoom. I can bring it up. I can bring up the copy of the offer right here for them to see it as I'm filling it in. So then I get into the red area here where I can kind of speak to the two main contingencies right off the bat. So, part of the offer process, there's three main contingencies. We've got um, our inspection contingency, our financing contingency, and our appraisal contingency. And I'll spend a lot of time on the inspection process. Really also saying, we're going to talk about this more in detail when we're at a showing. But the bulk of this process, and it's always the hardest contingency to get through. It's also the first contingency that we're going to get through. And if an offer is going to fall apart, 9 times out of 10, it's through an inspection. So we'll know within 10 days whether or not this is going to be going through. And not to say that we should think that it's going to fall apart, but if it's going to fall apart, it's usually because of an inspection. So this is again where I'll get into expected costs as well. So in addition to your closing costs, in addition to your down payment, this is the third area where you can expect some costs. A general home inspection is, usually $450 to $500. If there are follow-up inspections, there might be costs associated with that as well. But the point with this inspection period is to reveal thousands of dollars worth of work that you might need to either expect to take on yourself after closing, or we'll use this information to attempt to negotiate with the seller. So it's worth it for you to go through that process in order to reveal, again, potentially thousands of dollars worth of work. And again, with this inspection period, we've got 10 days-ish, 10 to 14 days, and we're going to have our general home inspection. We're going to reveal any issues that are going on with the house. We'll have follow-up inspections if needed, and we're going to negotiate all of this within this 10 to 14 day period. I don't go any further than that typically. I feel like that could bombard people with information, but really just honing in on the fact that this is our biggest contingency, and it's the hardest to get through. But once we're through this, then it's pretty much smooth sailing with the rest of the transaction. Then I'm talking about the financing contingency and the appraisal contingency, that they're work pretty much hand in hand with one another, that the lender is using the appraisal to make sure that they're not offering or lending you more than the home is worth. And that is a piece of the piece of the puzzle that they're taking on. So we don't have to hire the home appraisal or the home appraiser. Your lender is taking care of that. And then in this financing period, you've already had the pre-approval done. Now they're really just going to put a shiner bigger light on your financial picture, on the home itself, and you're going to be working closely with your lender in this process. And my job during this process is to make sure that we're meeting our deadlines, and making sure that you are communicating with your lender in a timely manner, to get them everything that they need in order to close and get your file through underwriting. And this process should take about, if you're using a lender, 20 to 25 days, possibly 30 days. But again, while I'm working with you pretty closely during that inspection process, I'm more hands-off in the lender underwriting process. You will be working more closely with your lender during this piece of it. And then once we're through lender underwriting, once we're through appraisal, I don't get into the nuts and bolts of the appraisal process in terms of like how it can play out. I'm doing that at the offer stage. Um, then, other things that are happening behind the scenes, title search process is happening, part of the offer. The seller needs to convey this property to you with free and clear title. If issues arise with that, we will be in communication, but that's generally just a behind the scenes paperwork, transfer of property, work that we're not really too involved with. So then you're going to obtain your funds for closing and then close on the property and take possession of the home. So again, I spend a lot of time just really on this one page and again, right sizing expectations. So going back to the buyer agency, so through this process in the state of Wisconsin, all agents technically work for the seller unless we have a contractual relationship with our buyers. So we would need to enter into a agency relationship, essentially just allowing me to work for you and give you the full gamut of services that I can give you, namely the right and the ability to negotiate for you and give you advice. This is why you are hiring me. This is why you want to work solely with a buyer agent in this process. I want to make sure that you are if our goal is to just get the house, so that again, speaking to market conditions, I need to give you advice on how we can tailor our terms in a certain way if we are in competition. If it's in a buyer's market, I'm really analyzing, studying comparables and making sure that, we're giving a recommended, talking about price, really giving you our all of the information possible if we think that a home might be priced too high. I always like to bring up the train tracks example. So in the state of Wisconsin, if I'm showing a home and I'm technically working for the seller, if I'm showing you a home that has a set of train tracks in the backyard, I can't really talk about resale value. I can point them out that there are train tracks in the backyard as a seller's agent. As a buyer's agent, I can look at that same set of train tracks and say, this might hurt you on resale when you go to sell this home later on. This is not a great condition to have in a home, as a set of train tracks in the backyard. So just really, it's like a very subtle difference with what you can and cannot say when I am showing you a home. So with buyer agency comes, again, a contract. And really, now you are committed to me and I am committed to you throughout this process. How buyer agents are paid in the state of Wisconsin. In the buyer agency contract, it states that you are paying the commission. Within those terms, though, it also states that a seller may pay the commission on um, behalf of the buyer. And 9 times out of 10, that is the way that we are paid as buyer agents. We've got enough time has passed under our belt to see that like really that hasn't changed. It's just we'll be asking for the commission through the terms of the offer to purchase. It does become a negotiation point. And again, I haven't run into it yet where a seller has not committed to paying the buyer's commission on their behalf. But that's not to say that it's a point of a term that they would want to negotiate on. The good thing is, though, is that you would never blindly go into an offer not knowing. So if a seller were ever to push back on paying a commission, you will know that before an offer is accepted. Again, every point in this transaction will be eyes wide open for you in terms of that. But again, around in Southeast Wisconsin, so far, we have not really seen a change in how that commission has been being paid. And I kind of leave it to that. I used to go more in detail when we first started, when that first shift last year happened. Um, but there just really hasn't been a need for it at this point anymore, just because again, it hasn't really changed in terms of how commissions are paid. Um, in the in my consultation as well, I have recommended lenders. And again, this is just all to have, they can use whoever they want. Um, and but you're gonna have your recommended lenders, of course. So if they're not even familiar with one, they can call on one of these. I always say a good place to start is your own bank, or your own credit union. I do talk about the importance of sticking with a local lender, though, especially within competition. So it's pretty like the bulk of it is just a 6-page consultation. Then I've got a home inspection handout for buyers. I will refer to this as well. This is an FAQ on the home inspection process that I would love for you to read as well. Um, I have a copy of a buyer agency agreement. I should say too, when I am going over that buyer agency process, I'm not trying to get them to agree to doing a buyer agency with me at this point. That's just not my style. But I do say that it is counterintuitive for me to not work as a buyer's agent for somebody, for a buyer. I just don't like to work that way. It's Again, it's very hard to be working for a seller entity that I don't have a relationship with. Um, so I'll explain that too. Generally, if you're working as a seller's agent, it's, maybe with a seasoned investor, who doesn't want to enter into a buyer agency. That's been my experience. Um, and I've also done it where, I might just be a buyer agent for this one property as well. But generally speaking, traditionally it's just you are connected with a buyer, you're going to enter into a buyer agency relationship with them. Once, once it's determined like, okay, so the next step, we'll go out and see some homes. You'll see, we don't have buyer agency signed yet. You'll kind of see what I can and cannot say. And then the next time we'll get into next time we meet, we can go over the buyer agency agreement and get that signed. But I just include a copy of it so that, again, so that they have a line of sight to what it looks like prior to us getting it signed. Whether or not they read it or not, at least I can say I sent it. Then I have a copy of an offer as well. Again, just for them to see what a contract looks like. And then I did actually include an addendum AC, which is that additional contingencies. I might take this out now because I'm not using this as much. But again, when we're speaking more to the market and the kind of things that we needed to include or potentially include on an offer when we're going to be writing in competition, this is where you'll see this expansion of terms. Tools for us to use again in competition to make your offer stand out more to a seller. So, going back. So yes, buyer agency and your role as a buyer agent, expected costs associated with the buyer. So, I am usually yeah, just talking about this as each point. So like when I'm talking about the need to connect with a lender, the costs that you can expect with that are their own closing costs. And this might be a reason why you want to shop around because every lender's closing costs might be different. It's not just rate, but their closing costs as well. And then, again, your down payment. Your lender will help inform you on the products they have, depending on what you're thinking of putting down for a down payment. So, it's not the traditional 20% always. There are products out there that you can do 3% down, 5% down, 10% down, but those are conversations that you're going to have with your lender. And then again, the inspection fees, and then the commissions is when I'm addressing that on the buyer agency. I wanted to bring up, so in our marketing concierge, um, so this is just a template of a buyer guide that we have available that Lindsay can tailor, Lindsay or Kathleen can tailor for you. But this is again just a template. So, we've got, you know, your about me section, some statistics, your personal statistics. Let me start from the beginning here. So I highly encourage you guys just to use this if you don't have anything else. Like I need to go to Lindsay and get this and get my own done here. Mine pales in comparison to something like this. Again, meet our team. So as a solo agent, maybe you'll have your contract to close person. I've had people put Joan or I's faces on this. So like again, like leverage our us, or your team leaders could go on here as well. Buying your home. So just kind of going through some colorisms here and what it's like to work with Keller Williams and what we stand for. And then just some specific office market center stats here. Why hire a buyer's agent? So this more in detail kind of goes over the kind of bullet points, what a buyer agent can do for you. Again, duties for negotiation and the ability to give advice, why you're hiring me in the first place.
Yeah, that's one of my goals
Soapbox.
that I
Yeah.
started is negotiation is, and you need to build your skills in negotiation as you grow in your business. But I believe negotiation skill is what you're being paid for.
I
I'm going
agree.
to fight for you.
Yes, I am your fiduciary. Your interests are above my own. I need to and I love Joan, like Joan always preaches this in terms of like, I'm in the boxing ring for you. So, um, and I'll say this too, in terms of like, sometimes the boxing ring doesn't look like, especially when we're in writing in severe competition and that buyer wants that house. I have said straight out, like, sometimes it's going to look like I'm not working for you because I'm I'm suggesting terms that are very highly favorable to a seller. But if we're going to get a house for you, that's what we have to do in this market. So it does change depending on if it's a seller's market or a buyer's market for sure. So just keep that in mind. It it very much can look different. Owning versus renting. This is a good chart. Um, what is the option for you? For a few years, renting can be a better choice. I didn't know this was included in here. This is nice. Um, Annual mortgage rates. So I know Charlie has shared this slide a lot in team meeting. Um, one of my takeaways from the first week of Ignite this year, especially, was just a lot of our agents, and remember that class is taught by seasoned agents, doing a lot of business, and a big theme was the importance of our team meetings and how much you learn in our team meetings, and bring that up. Charlie's market updates every week are just so valuable that you don't get those at offices, other brokerages. So I I would bring that up. Home buyer's roadmap, so finding an agent, your financial. So this is, you know, essentially what I had just gone over in my like flow chart. This is definitely prettier. But again, the nuts and bolts of it are the same. Real estate terms. So really what I want you guys to see from this is like you have this available to you if you don't have a buyer guide already. Just get in touch with again with the marketing team and they can tailor this to you. The home touring checklist, this is nice. Um, make an offer and negotiate. The home inspection process again. Appraisal and approval. Scheduling your move. What to expect at closing. And then then this one closes out with testimonials. So and then your resources page. So very nice. I had another point to make and I've forgotten it. But all right, let me just open this up. Stop my share. And then again, kind of from the compliance perspective, just like dotting I's, crossing T's, right sizing expectations, the ability to be able to, if there's ever like a point of contention between you and your client, you know, just like having that consistency with a buyer consultation, treating all parties the same. You know, you've got your process down. You can point back to the fact that you did go over this at one point, or that it was talked about. And again, so that you can demonstrate later on that you shared this. You know, you're gonna send this in an email. Yeah, it's just you save so much time by doing a consultation up at the front of and being as soon as you're connected to a buyer and doing this, you save yourself a lot of time throughout the process later on as well. So just a ton of time. And then again, you're just like not fumbling through it when you know, kind of piecemealing the process together. You just look like the expert. So this is just a very important piece of your job. So any questions? Okay, and again, we're like most of the time the buyer consultation is brought up and talked about in your productivity coaching. Joan and I are not addressing this very much. So we're just like one other perspective on it. So okay, so I think next week we're gonna be going over seller duties, listing agent duties. Joan, is that right?
Mm.
And then yeah, same time, same place. Thank you guys.